Welcome to today's episode of the Force of Nature podcast. Today's guest is a very special one. It's someone I've known for a very long time in my life. It's my partner, Sarah Robb, of Spring with Sarah. How are you today, Sarah?
I'm great, thank you, Conan. It's so nice to be here. I couldn't imagine 6 months ago that we would be recording a podcast together, so it's very exciting to be here.
Yeah, well, I probably would have thought it would be your podcast, not mine, 6 months ago, so it's definitely changed my thinking on the world. So can you tell us a bit about your background and what Spring with Sarah is?
Yeah, so my background is in the psychology and mindset space, and I started kind of getting interested in this since I was really little, to be honest, and then I studied psychology down at Dunedin, and then I had a few life events happen, as you know, over the last 10, 11 years that have really been the pivotal part for why I do what I do now, which is helping people with mindset, resilience and grief and helping them bounce back from struggles.
That's awesome. So do you want to tell us a bit more about, I guess, the story that got you to starting Spring with Sarah and why you actually started it?
Yeah. So 2012, I was lying in bed at university, good old Dunedin, in a cold, wet Dunedin flat, and I received a phone call from my mum. And I could hear the panic in my mum's voice, and she had rung to tell me that my father had fallen off a balcony and that he had died. Now, in that moment, I ran down the stairs trying to find someone, and eventually I found a flatmate, and my flatmate kindly called you, and you came around at that time. And as you know, 2 weeks later, we were at Dad's funeral, and then I came back down to Dunedin 2 weeks later, and I didn't cope with the death of my father very well. And that was really because there was a lot of complexities around Dad's death. I had held a pretty big secret for all my life, and that was that Dad was an alcoholic, and I didn't know how to tell my friends around me what was going on, so I just thought that I would keep it to myself. So what I did was I pretended to try and push away the grief and the pain and just get on, and I did what a lot of people do. I suppressed the pain and the grief and turned to alcohol and drugs and became a pretty nasty person. And unfortunately, you were there on the side of that along the way. But fast forward a couple of years, and we were up in Dunedin, and I started on my personal development journey. And that's where I started to work through the pain and the struggle of Dad dying. And then everything was back on track, and we were over, me and you, over in Colombia on a remote little town over there. I received another phone call, and this time it was from my brother, and he had rung to tell me that Mum had a brain aneurysm. And I know you and I in that very moment were pretty panicked, and from there we made our journey back to New Zealand, and Mum was in ICU, still alive, and 10 days later Mum died. So at the age of 26, I was faced with 2 dead parents, a world of grief, pain, heartache and loss in front of me. And that really has been the catalyst for why I want to help people and why I do what I do, is because I've walked through the fire and I know what it's like to be in the hole, and I also know how to get out of the hole. And I think that so many people need to realise just how powerful our minds are and how we are the creators of our reality, and when we can turn inwards and do the healing, we can create a pretty massive impact in our life.
Absolutely. So do you want to give us a bit of a background how you came to these conclusions, and then how that formulated into Spring with Sarah, the business?
Well, it definitely didn't happen overnight, as you know.
Yeah.
I think that many people go through grief. Everybody will go through grief sometime in their life, and I think that, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are, what age you are. You can find yourself in some really difficult spots. And for me, there were many dark days and many days that I remember you having to literally pull me out of bed, trying to get some sunlight and to help me in that time. But I think for me, there was something within me that was like, this can't be life. Like, it can't be like this. There must be something more for me here. And that's when I started really digging into the books and the podcasts and started to go on that healing journey. And the biggest thing that I found was about 3 months after Mum died, I didn't have a job because we'd come back from overseas. And I started just walking around Hagley Park. And in this moment, I started doing something differently. I just took a little bit more time and I slowed down and I watched the butterflies and the birds, and I'd noticed all of the really small things. And every single day I started doing this more, and I started practicing to live in the present. And I continued to do this. And as I did that, I started to realize that we are nature, and nature is not something separate from us, and everything lives and everything dies. And as soon as I had that realization in my life, I was like, okay, there's more for me here, and I can get through this. So it really was, the catalyst for me was actually understanding that there's so much power in learning to live in the present. And I think so many people are either focused on the past or focused on the future, and they completely forget what's most important, and that is the present.
Absolutely. I can say it has been a hell of a journey, but watching you grow over the years into who you are today has been an incredible journey. And through your growth, it's obviously helped me grow, and I probably wouldn't be here with a podcast or my business if it wasn't for you and the journey that you've been through. So, yeah, it's been pretty cool to watch along. Today, really, the reason I wanted to get you on is because I know that you have been working with quite a range of farmers across the country. So is there any kind of themes that you see that are reoccurring in those people that you work with, or it can even be wider in the industry?
Yeah, I think it relates back to what I was saying just then, is they're either focused on the past or the future. And a lot of people are getting really worried and concerned about what hasn't happened yet and focusing on a lot of things outside of their control. It doesn't matter whether you're a farmer, a business owner, or whoever or whatever you do in your life. The reality is, if you haven't mastered your mind will master you. And people need to understand that our minds are incredibly, incredibly powerful. And if you want to create change in your life, start with understanding the power of your mind. And then from there, you'll get the outcomes that you want. So in farmers and the people that I work with, I think it's really about starting to have these micro shifts in their mindset and being able to not necessarily go from one extreme to the other extreme. It's just about the small micro shifts to be able to create the changes that we're looking for. And I'm sure you can agree, like when we look back, even through your family and other generations, like the mindsets, are they still serving us? Are they still going to be serving the new generation of farmers coming through? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, what stories are we telling ourselves, or are we so committed to that we can't see, I guess, the wood for the trees? And how is that actually impacting on our day-to-day business, our family, our communities? Like, how are we interacting with everyone? And do we actually fundamentally challenge and believe those stories that we've been telling us, or has that just been handed down by the generations that we have? And I think that's a really good conversation to have with yourself and then your family if you're finding out things are actually not what you thought, and seeing if they are feeling the same as well. So it's a really good place to start, really, is changing that mindset and that story, and just realising that you're not going to have a massive jump at the start. It's always going to be little mindset shifts, and if you're doing that every day, you'd be surprised where you can be in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think from my journey, what I realised was that it is all the small micro wins and the small shifts. And when you turn and reflect, 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine where I am today, and that didn't happen overnight. It just came from the small shifts in my mindset along the way. And when I think about what you're just saying about stories and narratives, what I went to Australia to study is the power of linguistics and how language impacts the mind. And the reality is that, as I said before, we are nature. Nature isn't separate from us, and we are an animal species. And the reason that we're so much more advanced than any other species is our ability to form language. From language, we create meaning, and from meaning, we create stories. Those stories are what can keep us stuck, safe, and small. Now, whether that be a story of, I'm not smart enough to do that, or I'll never be able to learn, the reality is the stories and the narratives that you say in your mind will be what you live in your external world. So I think that, starting to shift the stories, starting to shift the narratives to something that's more of service to you is where the biggest mindset shift begins.
Absolutely.
What do you think are some of the farmers' mindsets or the stories or narratives that you see that could be slightly adjusted or need to shift in your sector?
I think, like for me, there's this mindset that there's a lot of externalities that control what farmers do and influence their mindset on day to day. So they are externally worried, but they have actually, a lot of these worries that they're worried about don't influence their day-to-day business and really don't have the control that they think they have. So recognising that and realising that they're the ones that are in control is probably the main mindset story.
Yeah.
And the other one is like, there's still like a lot of people who just do things because that's the way their family's always done things, and afraid to change because that might risk losing the family farm. But actually, there's a lot of opportunities out there. It's just being able to open your mind and your eyes to be able to start seeing those popping up, and then you can take advantage of those coming along.
I know for you, just going on this journey together is like, whilst we're talking about grief, it was quite a journey for you to go on, with your family farm and transitioning your parents from what they had always known to where you are now. And that in itself is a piece of grief, because would you agree that like so many people wrap their identities up in kind of their farm or their backstory, and like how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think that is probably one of those things that doesn't get talked about a lot in the industry, is when farmers do retire, they don't actually, even if they don't sell, like their identity was that farm and that they are a farmer. And if they don't have the support network or outside hobbies or something to work towards, that can often lead to bouts of depression, heavy drinking, or like dying early because they don't have a purpose anymore. And that's something that's not often taught about. And people need to recognise that when someone actually steps off a farm, they need like quite a lot of support to adjust, because it's a huge adjustment, because you've gone from being your own boss, you've got a beautiful piece of land, you're in control, to now you're just like, well, what do I do with my day?
Yeah.
I don't have that same sense of purpose anymore.
Yeah, and it's you can see that happening in your own life. And I guess that's why it's so important that we're talking about mindset, because the reality is it is the mindset shift to realising that you can create a new identity and a new version of who you want to be. And that's why it's important to actually find those things in your life and that sense of purpose, even if it is beyond the farm. And for you, what was did you find yourself go through a bit of grief when you sold your farm?
Yeah, obviously. Like, that was my piece of paradise. And for a long time there, I thought that you just don't think about not having the farm anymore. But yeah, there's definitely a bit of grief there. But I made the choice just based on, like, I had the opportunity to take over, but I didn't see that I could provide my parents with the retirement that they deserved. And I didn't see financially that farm could actually support myself and my family as well. So probably being a bit naive, I thought I could go to the big smoke and make some money and buy my own farm, which hasn't eventuated yet, but hopefully one day. But yeah, there's definitely a grief associated there. But I think because I made that decision before I left and I was still running the farm, then I had time to process it. But I definitely remember, like, the day I drove to Auckland, like, there were some tears in the car, like, that's chapter shut sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for farmers who are, or people who are going through those kind of generational changes in farm ownership, what do you think, being and have gone through that journey, what would you tell them, or what advice would you give them?
I think an important one is like, if you don't want to take the farm over and you're feeling the pressure to take the farm over because that's what the family wants and that's what they've always done, I think it's like hugely important. Like, it's your happiness at the end of the day, and there's a hell of a lot of debt in having a farm and stress in a business, and like, if you're not in it wholeheartedly, like, it's going to crash and burn either way. So I think families need to realise that if the next generation isn't prepared to take that on, like, you've got to have a serious conversation around, do we keep it in case the next generation want it? So it might be leasing it long term, or putting a farm manager on it who can run it really efficiently and there's still income coming to the family, or is selling the actual option, and sometimes that can be the best option. The other end of the scale is like that transition. I do see it regularly, is like they're handing it over to the kids to take and run the farm now, but the parents don't step back, and they're constraining all the decisions of the new, I guess, managers to not have the freedom to do what they actually want to do. And quite often, like, they want to change a few things, and they can be like, no, we're not doing it that way. So it's not giving the reins over like they may have been given at a young age. So I think that can be like quite straining on families as well. So it's probably one of the biggest issues within our industry at the moment is the succession. Like, it's such a complicated beast because there's normally multiple family members involved, huge amounts of money, and like a lot of stress. And like, there's obviously people doing it well, but it's the same thing. It's like context. Like, every family is different and every farm is different. So recognising that there's no recipe, but it's understanding that all parties are happy with the outcome.
Yeah, and I think on our journey as well, like, there's even the complexities of like being, what were we, like 25, and we'd been together for like 5 years already. It's like, and I didn't want to necessarily move to a farm at that age, and I had other aspirations. So it's not just the family complexities, there's also these other complexities, whether it be relationships or, you know, and in our instance, like, maybe I was a factor, maybe I wasn't, but I wasn't going to be moving to a farm at 25, although some people do, and that's okay as well. It's just, I think people don't realise that there's a lot of complexities, and I know that that was a big journey for you, but it's good that you can kind of reflect on that and see, I'm sure, like, just how much that impacts the people that you work with.
And there's plenty like examples of that where partners are moving to farms, like, and not really like sure whether they want to or not. So it's a huge step to go from, like, especially if they're from a city, like going with all your friends and everything just around, to being out in an isolated thing. Like, those people need a lot of support, and I know like friends who've got partners like that struggle, but now they're more settled. But at a young age, when you're used to socialising, like, it's a huge step to step back. And if like the community's mainly older farmers, it can be quite hard as well. But like, yeah, there's a lot of complexity around it, and it's just trying to keep that sense of community is a definitely way of recognising that people, like, who might be new to your area do need a bit of support, especially if they're not from a rural background. Yeah. So we've talked quite a lot about mindset already. In farming and agriculture, we hear about mindset, like, let's talk to each other. Depression's quite a bad thing, and suicide in the rural communities. But I always feel like, yeah, talking's great, but we're not actually giving people tools for their mental health so that they can use them before they get to that stage, which would help them avoid it all. Yep. Do you think that's just like a rural communities thing, or is it actually wider spread?
I personally think it's wider spread. It is predominant in farming, as you can see, but I think New Zealand's pretty far behind, to be quite frank. And when I've been to Australia and America, like, we're at least 5-10 years behind in this space. And what I do now is really helping people integrate the tools and strategies into their life and how they do the doing. And I think the key is like, it doesn't matter what you know, it's about what you do with what you know that matters. Doesn't matter how much you know about mental health, it's not going to make a difference if you don't start taking action and applying the tools. And on my life, like, it didn't matter how much I wanted to be out of the hole after mum and dad died. I wasn't going to get out of there by just thinking about getting out of there. And so I had to really use the tools and strategies that I'd learned and really dig deep in my internal world. And I see so many people, you know, in the depression or in the darkness. And yes, talking's one thing, but actually I don't know if talking is going to get you out of the hole. I think the tools and strategies and actually applying them in your life is what is going to get you out. And I do get a little frustrated because it's important to realize there is a lot of really great tools and strategies. I just don't know if we are using them in New Zealand enough.
So, in terms of those tools and strategies, there's a few that I quite like, but what do you think are the best ones that anyone can pick up and start using in a day-to-day system? Like, because a lot of them don't actually take a lot of effort. It's just, I guess, changing that mindset, isn't it?
Well, the first and most important one that I love talking about is the model by Stephen Covey, which is around the circle of control. Now, everybody has heard of, you know, control your controllables. It's one thing knowing it, and it's another thing doing it. And I think that for me is like, you know, there's so much that you can't control. You can't control the weather. You can't control whether a storm's coming. You can't control whether one of your animals dies. You can't control so much. Then that's, you know, a lot of where people are focusing their precious energy and time. And then you've got the circle of influence. And the circle of influence is the things that you can influence, but you can't 100% control. You can influence how much you feed out, or you can influence the decisions you make. You may not have 100% control over it if, like, the weather was a factor, for example. And then you've got the things that you have 100% control over. And those are the things like your mindset, your attitude, your work ethic, the way you show up, how you respond. And really the critical part is you want to be focusing at least 90% of your energy on the things that you have at least 100% control over. And so what I think is happening in the farming sector is people know this, but are they applying it? It's like, oh yeah, I know that. And then as soon as something bad happens, it's like, let's just flick that tool to the side. It's like, that's not how mindset works. Mindset works through repetition and consistency. So the circle of control by Stephen Covey is a really, really important tool. And I think, like anything in life, it needs to be reflected on at least, you know, on a monthly basis when you're doing your planning, is like actually setting your mindset up in those times so that it's not just one thing you do once a year, because that's not how the brain works.
Absolutely. I like the circle of control. I think it's a great one, and I think it applies perfectly to farmers. Like, what can you control on your farm system? And a lot of the things that you can't control, and what is probably what you're most worried about, like what the government's doing, what your regional council's trying to make you do, who's paying you what, you actually can control over that by changing suppliers or trying to sell your own product. There's ways around a lot of things, but just focusing on the I can't control that, they're trying to get me, and having that negative impact on your day-to-day life is what affects a lot of farmers, I think. It's also really good to see you chucking in a few farmer terms as well. You've come a long way in terms of your learning there too.
I remember learning about what an offal pit was. That was always a funny
thing.
Yeah,
that was always the tested question when you pretend to be a farmer. So, yeah, I think another one is the reticular active system, and I think that is like key for farmers because they just seem to filter through and hear what they want to hear, and forget about all this other good stuff that's going on in the background. And it could be just the way that the media and agriculture and wider is coming at them, but there's something that they can control too.
Do you want me to tell you a little bit about what the reticular activating system is? So if you are listening to this and you don't know what it is our brain's filtering system. There's hundreds of thousands of pieces of information in the external world, and our brain can't filter all of that information at once. So what it does is it puts it through a series of filters, which is called the reticular activating system. And the way that it works is that whatever's within your awareness, you will find more of. It's like you buy a new car and then you start seeing that car everywhere. You buy the swan try and then you notice everyone else has got the same shirt on. This is how our brain works. It will find what it's looking for. So if you've got a filtering system of all of the things that are going wrong on the farm, your brain is naturally going to find the evidence to support that filtering system. So one of the kind of mindset hacks is like, you've got to focus on what you do want rather than what you don't want. Because when you focus on what you do want, you start generating energy behind that, and then your brain starts focusing on that and finding the evidence to support why it's going to work or why it's going to have a positive outcome. Our brains are incredibly powerful, and we only live from around 5% of our brain's potential. So the reality is I think that mindset, as I said, it doesn't matter what you do, where you are, what career you have, whether you're a farmer or not. If you haven't mastered the mind, you've got to start there because it's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that filters into something you mentioned a bit earlier around how we respond to things, and like we've actually got the power to choose how to respond to a bad situation. So in farming, it seems like things go wrong just about daily. Something breaks, or the livestock get out, or something else comes along. Like, how do we create a mindset that ensures that we respond somewhat positively to those things?
Yeah, and I think it's having high enough awareness of your responses to start with. Awareness is really important. I think what I see, and this is a little bit of a sidetrack, is that we have 30,000 thoughts or more every single day, and people think that they are their thoughts. And I just wanted to let you know that you're not your thoughts. So when you're starting to get into those negative mindsets, it's really important to focus on the way that you respond. If you can't control what is happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to what is happening, because that is where the real power lies. You know, in my instance, I couldn't control that my dad died and he was an alcoholic, and I couldn't control that my mum died from a brain aneurysm. But what I did have control over is the way that I responded to those events in my lives, and then the choices that I made from there. I could have chosen a path of victimhood and poor me for the rest of my life, but I consciously made the choice to do something good with myself, and that all came from the choices that I made. And I think people underestimate the power of choice, and we think that life is happening to us. It's not. Life is happening for us, and as soon as you become the victim, you really can't create any form of change in your life. We need to start empowering people to create change rather than kind of nurturing them in their victimhood. And that's really harsh to say, but it, in my opinion, is the truth.
I agree. And I love the quote, like, life is happening for us, not to us. And I think when you start putting that on anything that happens to you, well, there's a reason why this happened today. And it kind of flips, well, why would that happen? What am I going to learn from this that is actually going to put me in good stead down the road? And I think once you start doing just a simple thing, I was like, why is this happening for me, not to me?
Yeah.
It actually changes your outlook on a lot of things.
100%. And I think that, everything at the end of the day is a choice. And it's important to realise that if you want to make a different choice, you can make a different choice. People get stuck because they feel like they have a lack of choice. But I feel like in any given situation, we always have at least 3 choices. You may not like them, but you've always got a choice.
Absolutely. So the power of choice is probably one of the key things in mindset. Do you agree?
100%. I think, as I said, maybe if you're not happy with where you are or what you're doing, you just got to make a different choice. If you don't want to be on the farm, that's okay. If you don't want to be doing it this way, just make a different choice. It will put you in a different direction.
So for people who are indecisive, you got any recommendations for them around the power of choice? Because obviously it'll be a bit harder for them, but I suppose once you start doing it, get the reps in, you get better, don't you?
Here's the key, Colin, is indecision is still a decision.
Mm.
And if you're indecisive, you're making a choice not to make a choice. So when we're indecisive, or if we're making a choice, it's like, don't worry if you make the wrong choice, because at least if you make that choice and you aren't happy with it, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn a valuable lesson. Might be a costly lesson, but nevertheless a lesson in itself. And I think in New Zealand and around the world, too many people are fearing failure based on that they always want to get it right, or they're indecisive because they don't want to make the wrong decision. But if we continue to sit in that place, how are we ever going to learn? And so it's very important to know that even if you don't always make the right choice, you have to have the growth mindset to go, okay, let me reflect on that, and let me take a moment to go, what did I learn from that can make me a better person, a better father, a better farmer, or whatever that may be.
And I guess part of that is understanding what you're trying to be as well, isn't it? What is the outcome you want, or what's your idea of success? And then you can actually make decisions based around that.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about that with clients, as I think New Zealand has conditioned us in a way where once we have this and then we have that and then we have the next thing, that will equal success. But I think it's important for people to define what success means to them. I know that in our relationship, our version of success isn't the same version as society's version of success. And for me, if you're using society's version of success, you can always be finding yourself chasing the carrot. So really identify what that is for you. Is it having a happy, healthy family and a consistent income? Is it being able to go on a family holiday once a year? Define what it is for you, because there's real power in doing that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I guess we get it quite a lot because at our age, everyone is married, and we've been together probably longer than most people, but we're still not married, and we get the questions all the time like, so when are you guys doing it? Oh, you must be going to have kids soon. So it's interesting to see that when you're not on, I guess, what you'd call almost the treadmill of ticking off the life goals, or you're just a little bit behind or just doing things slightly differently, everyone kind of starts questioning that,
yeah.
Which then I guess for some people will make you question why you're doing it yourself as well.
Yeah. And I think that you're 100% right. For me, at the end of the day, it's about making conscious choices, and just because we're not married and we've been together over 10 years, I think that in a lot of regards we have a great relationship, and that it's something, whether the piece of paper is signed or not signed, it really doesn't matter. We've been through a lot of hardship and a lot of tough times, and does that not just show to people the testament of love? That's pretty deep.
Yeah, that was pretty deep, eh? No, it was good. Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. Like, I think we've probably been through more than most relationships in our time, so we've stood the test of time in a few hard times, so I don't think we need a piece of paper for that.
Yeah.
Farming's going through a pretty tough period at the moment, and tough periods don't last, but what's some easy things for farmers to do to, like, if they're feeling like quite bogged down, like what's something that they can, a couple of tools or one or two that they can just start implementing and get things moving forward?
Come back and focus on the present. Remember what's important. I think for me in my journey, death rattles you. It will shake you to your core, and it reminds you what's important in life. And I had a quote that my client said to me the other day, and it struck such a nerve for me. And she said, aging is a privilege. And in that moment, I was like, wow, that's so true. I think we get so caught up in what we have or haven't done, or society's pressures, or the government, or what the weather's doing. Just come back and focus on the little things. Focus on feeling the cold breeze on your skin or the sunshine on your face with your cup of tea in the morning. Go and talk to your cows or your sheep. Honestly, it's enlightening. Aren't they incredible? Watch them for a moment and the way that they live their life and how they are so in the present moment. I think we underestimate the power of coming back and actually remembering what's important. And when you remember what's important, you can really start to pull yourself out of that darkness. And so focus on the present would be one. And I guess remembering, like, you've always got support. People are here. And this kind of stoic mentality that we've had in New Zealand for a long time, I can see that it's starting to shift, but it's still living and breathing. And I think that's why seeing you on your journey, Conan, has been such a privilege, because I feel like supporting me on my journey has, you didn't have a chance not to see the depth of emotion or to be in that with me. And that's really softened you in a good way and helped you realize that it's good to express how you feel and it's good to regulate your emotions. And I feel like we need more Conans in the world showing farmers that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to express how you feel, because, you know, this tough stoic attitude is why we've got an increase in suicide rates. And yeah, it's important to realize, like, we're all human. It's okay to feel your emotions.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Still a work on for me, for sure. I guess the way I grew up and the things I probably did is probably your classic farm boy, footy player, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's definitely a different side of what I grew up to and used to, and probably the people I associated with as well, like sharing emotions and that. But I definitely have noticed, like, even all my mates who grew up similar, and we're probably all rugby buffheads, probably didn't talk about our emotions all that much. Like, we have deeper conversations now. So I think there is a change going on. And if I go back to your first point about being in the present, I actually saw quite a good thing on social media the other day from Kane from FarmFit. He's a dairy farmer in the North Island, and he was getting bogged down on the farm, getting all stressed, and he just kind of came back to, like, why did I want to be a farmer when I was a 5 or 6 year old? Like, it was having pet calves and being out there with the cows and that. And he just says at the end of every day now, he walks through his herd of cattle, and he just, you know, has the ones that come up for a pat, but it kind of gets him in the present and remembers why I actually am a farmer and why I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it's not doing the paperwork and all the other things. It's actually looking after your animals or living in a beautiful place. Like, yeah. And it's just being aware of that.
Yeah, and I think the gratitude piece as well is sometimes when we get so bogged down with what is or isn't happening, we aren't grateful for what we have. And I think really practicing gratitude for your land, for your animals, for your family, for the food on the table. There's so much power in practicing gratitude, and it's kind of the first thing that can fall off the bandwagon when you're not feeling great, and it's the first thing that needs to jump back on. You know, take off your gumboots and walk bare feet in the soil, and as you said, do all those small things, because you've got to remember that you chose to be there for a reason. And like you were saying before, get back to what that purpose was, being on the land. And I think not coming from a necessarily farming background, but seeing you and your family is like, be proud to be a farmer, because you provide us literally the source we need to survive. So come back to those whys and really what's important, because, yeah, that's the key.
Absolutely. So with all my guests, I like to wrap up with a few questions, the same 4 questions. So the first one is, if there's anything that you could actually change about the agricultural industry based on what you know, what would it be?
It would be the mindset. It would be realizing it doesn't have to be this extreme mindset shift from one to the other. It's just the small micro shifts along the way, and realizing that if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. So these small micro shifts are really important, and just staying open and curious and to change, because change is the only constant in life. So it doesn't matter whether you're a farmer, a farmer's wife, or wherever you are in your life, start being able to master your mind. It will be the best decision you've made.
Awesome. The next one is, if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Well, I straight away want to say my mum and dad. Yeah. I don't know what they'd have to say right now, but I hope that they'd say they're proud.
They definitely would be.
If it wasn't my mum and dad, there's a man named Bob Proctor.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Bob Proctor is a godfather of personal development. I would love to sit down and pick his brains. I could continue to rattle off people. I would love to sit down with Tony Robbins. I would love to sit down with Brene Brown. I would love to sit down with, anyone who has created profound, pivotal change in the mindset and psychology space.
Awesome. No, all good picks. I think Bob Proctor is probably on my one as well. One of my top ones. What's your favourite thing to cook for dinner, since we are talking about the agricultural industry and you're just talking about they are crucial to our survival?
I like to cook, but recently I haven't been into it as much. Just running your own business takes a lot of time, as I'm sure you're starting to learn. But most recently I've really enjoyed cooking the food that we have grown, or you can't say caught, you've got to say shot ourselves. And I've really enjoyed learning how to cook really nice venison with horseradish and our lovely fig and goat's cheese salad. I've really been enjoying that lately.
Yeah, that's a pretty high-class meal. But to think that we've made the majority of it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just need a goat to make some cheese, really, don't we?
Yeah.
And finally, if you had, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
I think the piece of advice that I'd give my younger self was to believe in yourself more. I think what I see is so many kids want other people to believe in them, but self-belief is potent. And over the last kind of 5 years on my journey, I really started cultivating self-belief. So, yeah, what I would tell my younger self is just believe in yourself.
I think everyone should take that advice on. If we all believed in ourselves, imagine what we could achieve.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you for hopping on today, Sarah. It's been great having you on, sharing your journey and a few tools for the people out there. I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future.
Thanks for having me. It's been a privilege. And I think that, just wanted to say, really proud of you. It's awesome that you're continuing to take action, step outside of your comfort zone, because that is the key to getting where you want to in life, is taking those small actions. So really well done on starting the podcast. Proud of you.